Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading to Rongotai in Wellington. Please welcome Nicole Mckee. Hi, Nicole. Have a seat.
Wow. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for packing the auditorium today. I was actually really quite nervous, and when I came out down below, I was really nervous. But seeing you all here, I'm now feeling quite excited, so thanks. My name is Nicole Mckee, and I stand before you as an ACT Party candidate, vying for a spot to represent you all in the next term of Parliament. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me so that you can gain a picture of the person that I am, and a little bit about some of ACT's policies that I get to present to you today. I'm 48 years old. I don't dye my hair. I'm married with 4 children, although they're actually young adults now, and we only have the youngest one still at home. The other 3 are out there studying in tertiary education or partaking in that university of life. I was born in Lower Hutt, and I moved to Rotorua in my early teens. I came back to the hut in my early 20s, and for the last 20 years, I've been making a home with my family in Haitaitai, Wellington. Hence, I'm standing as the Rongotai candidate for the ACT Party. I've worked in a variety of occupations, in law for over a decade, both in Rotorua at East Brewster and in Wellington for Kubra and Matthews. 5 years with Steve's Wholesale, a reputable firearms component importer. I was the Mountain Safety Council National Firearms Program Manager, in charge of the most amazing and giving group of volunteer instructors, and they need an applause if they're here. That was an ad-lib, but it was worth it. More recently, as a small business owner, delivering firearms safety education in rural and isolated communities for the New Zealand Police. Volunteering in roles within community and sports is something that I have really cherished, giving back. Giving back to those that have volunteered their time to me and to those that are also coming through, sharing my knowledge and my learnings. I still sit on several boards, forums and committees, because this is where I have learned to advance the issues of the people that I represent. I've been fortunate enough to wear the New Zealand black blazer with the silver fern, and I have represented our country on a number of occasions in shooting sports, both full bore and service rifle. Disciplines that require the utmost dedication and commitment to get to national representative level. But I must say that the most rewarding role has been as a stay-at-home mum for 8 years to 4 beautiful, it's great, isn't it? We're lucky when we get to do it. And I have 4 beautiful, humble, talented young Kiwis, Jakana, Kiriahi, Rex and Brereton. While I was being that mum at home, my husband, who is a builder, decided to study at university and get his law degree. He got that degree and he's still a builder. So during that time, the only source of meat that we could afford was actually hunting our own. And I'm so grateful to the many people who made their properties and their time available so I could go hunt with them. And as a result, I became a keen hunter. And to the uninitiated out there, just let me say, don't knock it till you've tried it. There is something truly special about providing for your family from the land, our whenua, to the table. Hunting for so many is actually an essential pastime, and we must never assume that everyone has the equal ability to access affordable food. In this nation's backyard, we harbour a source of wild, edible, lean and unprocessed meat. And there are many who rely on their own ability to hunt and to gather. ACT wants to make sure that they continue to have access to this essential homegrown protein. Politics has its hands in most spheres of life, and hunting and wildlife are not exempt. New Zealand's economy is bolstered by such things as guided hunting that produces as much as $100 million of income into regional businesses. But this industry and income, it's under threat. Underhanded, backdoor attempts by the Greens to eradicate the Himalayan mountain goat, the tahr, is counterproductive and unethical. The Greens approved driving this animal to the brink of extinction, and they wanted it done now, while the snow is so thick in the national parks that the animals can't run away from the helicopters. Who would ever have thought that the Greens would purposely drive any species to extinction? They directed the slaughter of huge numbers of animals classified internationally as being of special interest. And why are they of special interest? Because New Zealand has been recognised as the only country in the world that has a sustainable herd. Stakeholders had to go to the High Court last week to force the government to rethink the radical culling. Sound herd management, not eradication, is the answer. ACT advocates saving the species, sending in the hunters, not the helicopters, and supporting our businesses. Let's move on to 1080. Sodium fluoroacetate, in the form of a poisoned pellet being dropped on our national parks in an effort to kill pests. New Zealand is the only country in the world using the poison this way. After a 1080 drop, the silence in our bush is deafening. 1080 kills much more than pests. I'm not a fan of 1080. I despise it. I do not like what it does to our game animals and to our farm animals when the drop mark has been overreached. I have real concerns about what it may be doing to our fish and the integrity of our lakes and our rivers and our waterways. We need to invest in alternate science and methods that will make us predator-free by 2050, but to be able to do it in a way that lives up to the claim that we make of being the clean, green country. I understand that there is work being done on bettering the deer repellent used in the drops, and we do still need to eradicate the pests. But we need to find solutions fast so we can stop dropping deadly poison all over our pristine rural lands. This is one of my priorities, and that is why ACT is committed to finding and funding alternate solutions to poison drops. Now, let's talk about guns. Last year, the Labour government enacted a radical change to New Zealand firearm laws. And as a result, I was drawn to ACT when our leader, David Seymour, became the sole voice of reason through the first tranche of rushed arms legislation. He was daring to be different, but he didn't have to sell out his values to do so. ACT tried to take the emotiveness out of the decision-making and attempted to encourage solution-focused policies as a real target. Now that took real guts. David Seymour was being shouted down by so many, but he stuck to his principles, to his party's principles, to promote better and efficient public policies. David Seymour alone recognised that the process was being unnecessarily rushed. Guy didn't even know anything about guns. But it's the principles that mattered. So that man, he got my vote right then. And we need more people like him in Parliament. Just last month, the Labour government pushed through a second tranche of firearms legislation. Once again, it was poorly drafted and riddled with mistakes. It does not even attempt to address the real issue: criminals with guns. There are very real concerns around the data security of a gun register. I mean, look what just happened with COVID-19. The draconian regulations that are forced onto clubs and ranges that will see some of them close, that violation of a doctor-patient relationship that's going to stop people from seeking help. The only changes that were made to the bill before its assent were to fix a small number of basic mistakes that were made in the first draft. They will also see delay in parts of the implementation over several dates. This is confusing people as to what they need to comply with and by when. The bottom line, the Arms Legislation Act 2020 will not make New Zealand safer. ACT's got a policy that can fix this. Give us your party vote, and our priority will be to have this year's Arms Legislation Act repealed. We will then set about restoring the best firearms laws in the world by including all stakeholders in the drafting process. We will introduce a new bill that will balance public safety and firearms control, safe use, responsibility and freedom. Ultimately, we will update and replace the Arms Act 1983 and all of its subsequent amendments. We also support the face-to-face local presence of vetting personnel and arms officers regardless of who is administrating the licensing regime. Now this is going to make all of New Zealand safer. ACT plans to go after the gangs and their guns, hitting them where it hurts, in their pockets. If police find illegal firearms at an unlawful operation like a meth lab that's been run by a gang, their assets will be seized. In the current law, the Crown is required to establish a direct connection between the gang's illicit money and their assets. ACT will make the illegal possession of a firearm a new threshold to freeze and seize. What is really important here is that this policy will only be enforceable on gangs and their members, and only where an unlawful gang operation is taking place. So this means that Joe citizen won't lose their assets if they do something wrong, but they might lose their licence and their guns. There needs to be a clear line between criminal activity and genuine human error. Both will have consequences, but at the moment, all licensed owners are being treated like criminals, and this needs to stop. On to welfare. I spoke earlier of relying on hunting to feed my family, and there were times when I also had to rely on government welfare to see me through some of those harder times in life. I embrace the available welfare system the way that it should be, as an interim measure while you work your way through the stepping stones to employment. It is vital that the government supports Kiwis in genuine hardship, those who cannot otherwise support themselves or their families. Government should play a limited but important role in protecting the vulnerable, and we want to make sure that nobody is left behind. ACT's plan is to introduce an employment insurance fund. Hard-working New Zealand taxpayers won't have to pay more for it. We will redirect 0.55%, that's a little over 0.5% of your taxes that you already pay, to a ring-fenced fund. You can then claim employment insurance for 1 week in every 5 that you have worked. So if you've paid into the scheme for 4 years, 55% of your average weekly earnings will be your benefit for a maximum of 26 weeks or up to $60,000. If you've been employed for a year, then you would be entitled to 10 weeks at 55% of your earnings over the year. So we're making your taxes pay for when you are out of work. So you know, ACT will not be making any changes to the supported living payment, the orphans, unsupported child, young parent or youth payment beneficiary benefits. But we do need to ensure that those on the job seeker and solo parent benefits are using this option as intended, as that stepping stone to employment and assistance in their time of need, rather than a government-funded lifestyle option. $6,000 children a year are born onto a benefit. And the simple truth is that these kids face a bleaker future than children that are born to parents in work. They face worse outcomes on nearly every social indicator, and it is often intergenerational. Short-term requirement is fine, but chronic long-term dependency on welfare is damaging the spirit and the well-being of too many New Zealanders and their children. This needs to change. ACT will introduce electronic income management for beneficiaries on the standard job seeker benefit and those who continue to have children while they're on the solo parent benefit. There will be income management for those convicted of benefit fraud, for people with substance or alcohol abuse problems, and those that are coming out of prison. For people who don't know, the electronic income management is where a beneficiary is issued with an electronic card which tracks their spending. It has restrictions on the purchases of alcohol, tobacco, and gambling, so the money actually gets to where it's needed the most. Nearly all of the benefit is issued on the electronic card, apart from a small amount of discretionary cash which is given to the beneficiary. We are already successfully using electronic income management for the youth and young parent beneficiaries. ACT wants to see the teaching of financial literacy to help all New Zealanders gain employment and move away from state dependency. So finally, back to my reason for being here. I bring to this party real life experience for all of the policies that I have shared with you today. I dared to be different, and I laid out my personal profile for causes that are shared by others that are here. I want to live in an Aotearoa that values freedom of choice and expression, a country that promotes personal responsibilities, a country where our future generations can actually afford to live and to work, a country that has a government that listens and acts responsibly for all of its citizens, an Aotearoa where we all take responsibility to change our future. Thank you. Kia ora.